Hi there. This video is one in the series of combative concepts, and what we're going to do now is go into the various breakdowns of concepts as taught in various places, and we're going to start with the figure who really kicked the whole thing off, and that's W.E. Fairbairn. Now, his career is really well known, and I've reviewed a couple of his books and talked about him before. But briefly, for those who may not be familiar with him, he was an officer in the Shanghai Municipal Police back at the start of the last century, around about 1900 onwards, and after serving in the Royal Marines out in the Far East, he joined as a constable and worked his way up to be assistant commissioner. And on the way, he was he had the experience of waking up in hospital without realizing what had happened to him. He'd been assaulted, and that spurred him to go and seek instruction in jiu-jitsu, which was later judo. And he gained his black belt and indeed a second dan at a time when these were very rare even amongst Japanese. So he was a pioneer in that, and he also studied Chinese martial arts, what was called Chinese boxing at the time. But the interesting thing was, because he was engaged in police work, he wanted a practical system that would work in the street, and he actually looked at the traditional martial arts, and he rejected something like 80% as being ritual, but he kept a core which was useful. And at the same time, he was very much involved in firearms training, and this led to the development of a specialized raid unit, which was really the first SWAT team. It had a huge vehicle full of all sorts of equipment, ladders, ballistic shields, searchlights, crowbars, entry tools, ropes, spare ammunition, all this kind of thing. And they deployed on numerous raids. Shanghai at the time was the most dangerous city on earth. There were murders, kidnappings, and assaults on a very, very frequent basis. And this built up. He became not just a leader of SWAT team, but an instructor in all the skills, and developed it all. At the end, or at the start of World War II, he came over to the UK, and together with Eric Sykes, they became instructors at Loch Aelot Special Training Centre, and taught the commandos and other personnel there. Then at Arisaig House, taught the SOE, Special Operations Executive, and then Sykes stayed in the UK and he taught the Jedburgh teams, while Fairbairn went over to the United States and taught the OSS. I consider Fairbairn to be the father of CQB. As mentioned, he taught unarmed combatives. He taught the use of the stick in a very practical short system. He taught the use of the knife, and he taught close quarter firearms use. He also designed various weapons together with Sykes, the famous Fairbairn Sykes dagger. He also designed the smatchet. whilst in America with Millicent, he developed a knife, and he also was involved in the design of numerous clandestine weapons. Now, other people did make contributions in various spheres, for example, unarmed combat or pistol shooting, but no one really can claim to have put it all together in an integrated way, develop the weapons to go with it in the way that Fairbairn did. So he was, to my mind, the father of CQB. And as such, while he was training people like the SOE, he did emphasize certain principles. He was very, very insistent that the personnel should develop the right mindset, the right attitude, because at that time, British notions of fair play, playing by the rules and so on were instilled very, very deeply in us. And you know, people fought with the hands, they didn't kick, and they rejected a lot of the what they would call foreign trickery. And Fairbairn insisted that there was no such thing as a fair fight, and we're not playing cricket. So he emphasized a win at all cost attitude. And to do this, he emphasized artifice. So that was his first principle, artifice. This is broken down into deception, masking your intentions, your role, your capabilities, blending in, clothing-wise, accessories, posture, gait, everything to deceive the enemy. And then also distraction, using misdirection to divert occupiers' attention, allowing you to access a weapon, to escape, or to strike. Now, many people I've worked with use distraction to great effect. And one of the internationals, Clint, showed a technique for using distraction before a slap. A big hand gesture. Using one hand to attract his gaze while you slap with the other. A friend of mine, Tommy, on the door, if confronted by someone who was obviously going to kick off, he would say, "Okay, mate, just wait till this copper's gone." And the fellow would turn around to look for the policeman, bang, fight would be over. So, distraction. Marcus put together his thoughts on Artifice in a very, very long article, and I'll put a link to it and some really good discussion on that. So after Artifice comes Force. Force is the application of power to produce an effect, whether it's a bullet, a blade, a bludgeon, whatever. The use of force. We modify people's behaviour by using force on a continuum. Sometimes you only need a little force, sometimes just your presence or verbal will do it, and sometimes you have to use lethal force, and everything in between. Number 3, vehemence. Commitment, focus, determination to prevail. The modern term is aggression and is regarded as 80% of winning. With total aggression, almost anything will work. Without aggression, almost anything will fail. It must be built up in training, and it really drives what we're doing. You must experience it. You must experience the feeling of aggression. Aggression produces chemical and hormonal changes in the body. And as Masai Ayub says, it's what you're using to fuel the fairness for the fight. Now, learning of skills should be done in a a calm and considered manner. I always say you can't scream and shout people into being a good shot. But once you've instilled the skills, they must be tested. They must be verified. You must introduce stress. You must introduce aggression. This is where scenario training comes in. And Fairbairn, again, was a pioneer in this with his what he called the House of Horrors. Even back in Shanghai, he had what's usually known now as a killing house or a CQB house for the shooting. And he did it also with the SOE and the OSS. And it was all sorts of encounters, including using the knife, sound effects, all sorts of things to build up, to give you the experience. It's all about experience-based training. Once you've experienced certain things, you can plan how to deal with them. Aggression is built up in hand-to-hand combat, so you can transfer it over into the firearms training as well. And the final principle was shock, which is surprise. Using Artifice, then unleashing vehemence, induces shock, allowing you to dominate the encounter to win. So the shock effect is something that allows you to really put everything else into practice. So there, his principles: artifice, force, vehemence, and shock. After the war, W.E. Fairbairn continued training personnel in Cyprus, Singapore, and the final manual that was produced or that was available is the Cyprus manual, and again I'll put a link to where you can get hold of that. His contribution was immense. The next part of this series, we will look at how CQB principles were developed in special forces.